So now we're going to look at section 2, which has to do with presenting the self. What I want to make sure you do before you get to this section is do exercise 4.2, where you take the characteristics that you came up with, which are your your private self, your perceived self, and then you're going to give them to other people, not in order, and you're going to ask them, or actually there are two ways you can do this. You can say, here's a list of adjectives and nouns that describe me, put them in order from most important to least important. You could, if you wanted, say to, I think that's the easiest, kind of quickest way to do it. If the other person has more time, you can say to them, can you give me a list of 20 adjectives or nouns that would describe me, and put them in order. And this is getting at your presenting self. Okay, so in this section of chapter 4, you're going to, by the end, explain how you manage impressions in person and online to enhance your presenting image. So, perceived self, I like this definition, is the person you believe yourself to be in moments of honest self-reflection. Another way of saying this is that's the private self. Oh, let me minimize this. Okay, here we go. For some reason, this terminology frequently baffles students. I don't know why. Perceived, how you perceive yourself. Okay, the opposite one is your presenting self, how you present it to the world. Okay, it's your public image, the way we want to appear to others. And I put, obviously they said it's a public image. This is our public self. And I would say public selves because, and we'll talk about this as we go on, you don't just have one. I would argue, and you would probably believe me, that you are not exactly the same in the classroom as you are at work, as you are at home, as you are with your friends. So we have different faces that we put on. No, they're not masks. They're actual, it's just the way that we want to be in certain situations. Okay, and so there's a term called face work. It's the ways that we act to present our image to other people, and it's also the words that we use. So that's why we say it's the verbal and nonverbal ways. And sometimes what we do is we are working on helping other people present their image. I have a friend who is always late. Always. I mean, if she gets someplace and it's 10 minutes after when we were supposed to be there, she's on time. And there's always an excuse. Oh, the boys woke up late, or there was a lot of traffic, and I know that it's not really true. She's just bad with time, but I play along with her. So I'm helping her save her face in a sense. Okay. So this is not in the textbook at all, but I thought this was interesting. And this is probably a decade old. So this is a little bit old because people change. So they talk to college students, and they have the first, if we're starting from the left, the first two columns are perceived self, how men perceive themselves and how women perceive themselves. And then this is how they present. So I thought it was interesting that you see friendly, responsible, independent, capable. Where did I see? My eyes just crossed. Happy. This is how people perceive themselves. So there's actually, a pretty good, and here's active. All right, they might not be in the same order, but, friendly, active, responsible, independent, capable. Oh, that hurt. My fingers are sore today. Attractive, happy. So that's 7 out of 10 are the same. But look at the presenting self. That men are presenting as wild, able. I don't know the difference between able and capable, frankly. But this is where it's, first of all, the perceived self and the presenting self are very different for men and for women. But there's much more similarity between how men and women perceive themselves than how they present themselves. All right. Again, we're going to look, this is an issue of social phenomena. What is going on in society that is telling men that it's okay, it's good to be wild and active, strong, proud, smart? Sounds like a commercial for, aftershave. Okay. This is something to think about. And I think I would like us to talk about this a little bit in class, like to kind of start looking at what society tells each of us, and how are we going to define society exactly, about how we should, putting this in air quotes, how we should be. When we get to chapter 9, which is about emotions, we'll look at the whole issue of the word should. Okay. So now let's look at, we're going to present, I'm sorry. What are some characteristics of impression management? Okay. So, as I said, when you think about how you are in different situations, you're not always the same. So it's human nature to maintain a multifaceted identity. And imagine the way you are with your friends. And if you brought that same identity to work, is that going to be, is it going to be good? Is it going to be effective? Or the way you are when you are communicating with grandma or great grandma and you bring that to your friends, so there's nothing wrong with having a multifaceted identity. That's just what everybody does. I like the idea that impression management is collaborative, which means that the book uses, okay, you're the actor and the rest of the people are in the audience. I'm not sure. Members of the audience are trying to create their own characters, but I'm trying to get my words in order right now. When we are interacting with other people, we take our cues from how they are acting. Well, suppose you're out and about and you're feeling good, and the impression you want to give is happy person who thinks the world is a wonderful spot. And I'm gonna turn the fan on because it's sticky. Okay, and you're bubbly, you're full of life, and everything is good, and this is who you are today, and you come across a friend who's having a real tough time. Okay, you're going to tone that down because you know that with this friend, your bubbliness, your happiness is not going to help bring them up, but it's going to piss them off and they're going to want to slap you. So you change the self that you bring to that scenario can be different. Oof. Okay. And impression management can be deliberate, as in that situation that I described, or it can be unconscious. I like this. Communicators engage in facial mimicry, such as smiling or looking sympathetic in response to another's message, only in face-to-face settings where their expressions can be seen by other people. When they're speaking on the phone, they don't do the same expressions. I don't think they're not doing this deliberately. You're not saying, oh, I'm face to face with someone, therefore I will smile. It's just, we talk about this more in the class if you're interested. There's something called mirror neurons, and we have a tendency to actually mimic the other person's facial expressions, for example. Okay. interestingly, we also tend, and we'll talk about this more, I think, in language, we tend to mimic the language that another person uses and the rate of speed. If you talk really fast and you are interacting with someone who speaks more slowly, you will most likely slow your speech down, and they will most likely speed theirs up a little bit. Okay. So, what about when you're face to face? What are some of the ways? What are some of the strategies maybe that we use to manage the impression that we're giving other people, or how do we manage our presenting self? There are three: manner, appearance, and setting. So when we say manner, it has to do with the words that we use, which we will talk about in chapter 6, and the nonverbal actions that we do, and that how fast we talk is considered a nonverbal also. That's chapter 7. Okay, so think about situations that you have been in where you have very consciously chosen the words you use, and then the nonverbal, the way you've behaved. Okay, another one is appearance. These are personal items people use to shape an image. So, classic. You go to a job interview. How do you dress? I think this is here's unconscious for me. A couple of years ago, my hair was, I think it was purple, or could have been turquoise. It wasn't this color. This is a new color for me. And I colored my hair for two reasons. One, because my hair is starting to go gray, and I'm not ready for that. But also, just because it's fun. It's something different. So I was doing a new student registration, and the advisors were sitting at tables, and the students were sitting in rows. And all of a sudden somebody says, I don't know, Elizabeth, come over here. Professor Yowen will advise you. And this woman says, oh, I was hoping it would be you. And I said, oh, okay. Why? Do I know you? And she said, your hair. So the fact that my hair was either purple or teal, turquoise, said something to her. Her impression of me was that I don't know, I was a divergent thinker maybe, or I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know what the fact is that I have colored hair means. At one point when I went to see my physician, she's no longer my primary care physician. She retired. And I think I had blue hair, and she's like, oh, you dye your hair? And I said, oh, yeah, my students really like it. And she said, oh, well, and then what are you going to do next? Get a tattoo? And I said, it's hair dye. Okay, so her impression of my dyed hair was very different. Okay, and neither of the impressions were necessarily the impression that I was trying to present. So, okay, the last factor is setting. The physical items we use to influence how others view us. So, I would like you to walk around to various professors' offices to see how they have set up their office, and see what is you're gonna say, okay, so I went to Professor X's office, and I saw this, and this, and this is what I believe. This is the message. This is the impression that they are trying to create, and I hope that you will at least come and stop by my office. How about on Wednesday? Next week, the 29th, anyone who wants to, follow me back to my office after class so you can see it, and I'll have to make sure that I clean it up. I do have a colleague who I think has decided that he's just going to decorate with piles of paper. So I will have you look in his office. Okay. So that's face to face. For me, that's the easy one to do. So now we have impression management in mediated communication, because we do not me, people do a lot of communicating via mediated communication. And how can people manage their impression? So, initially people were saying, mediated communication, it's because it's lean, because it's asynchronous, because it's permanent, that means that it's going to inhibit communicators' ability to manage their impression. Okay, but the authors maintain that the fact that the message is lean, that there's no tone of voice, there's no facial expression, we can't tell how fast the person is speaking, that can be a real plus. Because if you have to convey, especially a difficult message, you don't have to worry about the fact that as you're saying it, you're smirking, or you're looking like, oh, I don't want to hurt your feeling, but I have to tell you this. You can just type it, and then maybe put a smiley face if you need to. Okay, how can asynchronicity be beneficial? All right, so what is asynchronicity? Remember, synchronous means at the same time, and the prefix a means not, right? Like, can I think of a word? Cannot, just went blank. Okay, so asynchronous means it's not happening at the same time. So you send a message to someone and they don't necessarily need to respond immediately. So I'm sure you've all got a message and your first response is, you're gonna you're pouncing on the keyboard to send that message. If they talked to you face to face, you would have to respond immediately. But because mediated communication lets us pause, that can be very beneficial. You can craft your message instead of being put on the spot. All right, so you guys are going to have to tell me more about social media profiles. This is one of the way that people manage their impressions. So you decide, let's say you in your online profile, are you going to have a photo? Are you going to tell people how old you are? What's your educational, the highest level of education you've completed, what you've done in your career, your sexual orientation, your job title, your personal interests, personal philosophy, religious beliefs, and organizations to which you belong. I mean, you decide what you are going to share and what. So basically, you are managing your impression. I will share this much. I will let people know about this, but I will not let people know about that. And one of the things they kind of end this section with the suggestion that we all engage in reputation management. That periodically you Google, or whatever you use, but I'll use Google. You Google your name and see what comes up, and if it's information that is no longer representative of who you are, then it's a good idea to get rid of it. Okay, the next one. So I had to ask my students, because I didn't watch it, but I guess this is from Catfish. Okay, so here's the issue. If we are managing our impression, are we being dishonest? And it is true that people sometimes misrepresent themselves to gain the trust of others, hence the picture from catfishing. I don't know, the expressions on their face, I wish I knew the backstory a little bit more. Okay, so most of the time what we are doing with impression management is we're balancing how honest we can be while still being positive. And we're going to talk about this a lot more in the next section when we're going to look at self-disclosure. So somebody says, oh my gosh, there was a book my son loved as a kid. It had Go Dog Go, I think it was, and we had a video of it too. And there was a dog who, if she was a French poodle, and she would say, "Do you like my hat?" And the dog would say, "I do not like your hat." Most of the time, we cannot be that direct, especially if it's someone we care about. Say, "Hey, Grandma, I just knit you this sweater." And what did I say? It was dogs playing poker. And you say, "Thank you, Grandma, I love it." Okay, because you are trying to maintain a positive face, you're also trying to save Grandma's face. Because if you say, "I hate it," what the hell were you thinking? That's not going to go over too well. Okay, so if you are managing your impression, it doesn't mean that you are lying. You are deciding which facet of yourself to present. So before I became a faculty member at Tunxus, I worked initially in the admissions office. I was the the assistant director of admissions, and then I worked in the counseling office as a first year counselor. And I have been known to be just kind of a little exuberant. So we had a brand new dean, and he was my supervisor. He was the boss of the area. He was the dean of academic and student affairs. And I definitely respect people in authority. And I wanted him to think that I was hardworking and intelligent and good at my job. And it must have been a Friday afternoon, because Friday is the day to say, "Woof, the week is over." Anyways, I burst out of my office. I throw my arms in the air and I start singing a song from the 60s, Young Girl. And as I'm belting it, because there's no students are there, it's Friday afternoon. As I'm belting it out, the dean walks out of his office and he looks at me. So I didn't do that deliberately, because that I knew my boss was there. So at that point, I had decided to present the facet of myself, which was, crazy Friday afternoon Marguerite. Unfortunately, that kind of stuck in my boss's head for a while, until at one point we were at Farmington High School. We're all sitting around a table, and I had to tell them about the college to career program, that we had. And so I very succinctly and elegantly presented it, and my boss, the dean, turned to me and he said, "You're really good at your job." So, luckily, I erased that terrible first impression that I had made on him. So, I could be both crazy and a very effective worker, usually not at the same time. Okay, so we always have a choice about how to act or how to react, and we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail in the next section. Alrighty. And